Welcome back to the Incredible Machines podcast, where we sit down with incredible people doing incredible things. Today we sit down with Preeya Daya, a powerhouse in the fields of diversity, inclusion, and personal transformation. We talk about the power and importance of self-love, service, kindness, and the value of small acts, diversity, inclusion, and authenticity. So settle in as we dive deep into an episode filled with wisdom, vulnerability, and practical lessons we can all learn from someone who truly lives what she teaches. Let's dive in with the incredible Preeya Daya. If you could go back in time to your 16-year-old self, what would you tell yourself?
So I think I would say I am enough. I think that one of the biggest problems that we have as a society is that so many people don't feel that they are perfect the way that they are. And then that in turn drives inadequacy, and it drives the need to maybe not enact in their best way, because they're working from the space of inadequacy as instead of a place from I'm abundant and I'm beautiful. And I think my 16-year-old self needed to hear that message, because it's taken me, I think, too long and too much trying to prove myself. And if I believed in me earlier, I think I just would have had a more joyful life. And I don't know that it necessarily would have been a different life, but I think because I am a fighter, and so I think I always would have had a path of fighting for what's right. But I think that would have come with less insecurity for me, which would have been nice, you know? Yeah. So that's my message to my 16-year-old self and to many other people out there. Is you are enough and you are beautiful the way you are.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. So take us then back again, rewind a little bit more. So 16 years from that, where were you born in Durban? You brought up here?
No, I'm actually born in PE. And, so I was raised, and it's only really taken me, my adult self, to understand what it really meant to be born in apartheid. Because I didn't know until I was really a lot older what it really meant. Because, you're just kind of living, you're just existing. And for all intents and purposes, I grew up in a bubble of love. So my parents were really successful in creating a safe haven. And we had everything that we needed. And when I say everything that we needed, we had enough space. We had, I have 3 sisters and my parents, and then we have a really lovely extended family. And so I grew up in the kind of this lock of this community of people where I never felt, that this is something odd. That yes, sure, everybody was Indian in terms of my family, but I actually from a very young age went to a Catholic school, which was multiracial. So I had a somewhat of a unusual upbringing in South Africa because it was diverse, when many South Africans weren't having that experience. And I guess that formative experience really shaped my work. When I then, so I was a young girl, not knowing too much about, difference in South Africa. And then when I was 13 and needing to go to high school, I then changed schools. So once again, my family environment, very safe. I had the same experience of my schooling environment, very safe schooling environment, really nice teachers. I mean, sure, there were some teachers with their oddities, but really that comes with any environment. And the same with my little school friends. They were all lovely people. As far as I remember, I don't remember any animosity or any unusual things. Moving into high school is probably when I've had my first experience of, oh, okay, so this is what apartheid South Africa means. So schools opened up. It was 1990 or 1991. I can't remember the exact year. Schools opened up and I was going into grade 6. No, so it was standard 6 at the time, which is the current grade 8. And I remember some children looking at me really peculiarly because I, of course, had that socialization of growing up with a few other black children, many white children, a few other Indian children. But many white children hadn't been socialized to being around other Indian children. So for them, it was a new experience. So for me, I was a bit like an alien. And I wasn't really used to being looked at in this way, but I kind of just thought, oh, okay, well, this is it. And then I remember one child asking me, do you eat Kellogg's curried cornflakes for breakfast? And I just thought, gosh, what an odd question. Why would I eat curried cornflakes for breakfast, And I remember when I used to open up my lunchbox, people used to look at what I was eating, So there was a sense of, because there'd been so much segregation in the country, there was a sense of actually, what does this person eat? And so there was a lot of curiosity. And of course, I grew up in a vegetarian Indian household. So to be honest, the food is quite different to a Western diet. It's my lunch boxes were very different from peanut butter sandwiches. I have to say they were probably more interesting. So I was, I think in the beginning, certainly looked upon with some curiosity. But anyway, that was probably just normal socialization at that time. I had a very good, successful schooling career. I went to a really strong school that really embedded a sense of self, a sense of questioning. And all of that was echoed in my own upbringing, which was not, I guess, patriarchal in some senses, but not at all patriarchal in the sense of women do this and men do that. There was a sense of all humans work very hard. And so that value system of every person works very hard to get to where they want to be is, I think, a kind of core ethos that started very early. So, at home, we all, from a young age, we all worked hard in the kitchen. We cooked, we cleaned, we baked, we worked in the garden. Yes, as kids, we could play. We played, for hours and hours in the garden. We played sports. Even on the weekends, we used to go to sports fields and, so we had a really good, well-rounded upbringing as far as that went. But, during school holidays, we also worked, in my father's businesses, I remember, one holiday I went and I worked as a shoe salesman, when I had to go to the back, and when somebody liked a shoe, go and fetch the shoe and help them try it on, And I didn't think anything of this. I thought that was such an awesome experience for me to be able to earn pocket money during my holidays. So I didn't think that this was at all abnormal, that I should be doing something like selling shoes during the holidays. It's only now when I grow up and I think about, how do I start to socialize my children in the same way, that I realize, gosh, I don't know that my children will go and sell shoes during their school holidays. But because I grew up in an environment where, we work, I never questioned when my holiday job was to sell shoes. And I wasn't selling shoes to contribute to the family. My parents had enough money. They, the money was for me.
What did your parents do?
My father's a pharmacist, and my mom is a nurse, but she spent a lot of her time supporting my father in his work. And of course, she raised us, 4 girls, no joke. So she was very busy between helping my dad and then also raising us, doing a lot of school runs because, so there was, because we were going to Catholic schools, there was a lot of commuting time. So this is another thing that my parents did that I really can't imagine doing now. I'm not selfless enough to do. We spent almost an hour a day commuting. So we had to go from our Indian, the suburb that we lived, which is really on the outskirts of the community of the schooling environment. So we traveled almost 40 minutes to school every day and back. So they spent a lot of time in the car, taking us to school, bringing us home. And there were times that we were able to access public transport, but that was also unreliable. So they spent a lot of time driving their 4 children up and down. One fetch them at 2:00, then you're going back to school to fetch the 4:00 child, So my parents did a fair amount of driving.
Yeah.
Interesting, hey?
Yeah.
Like, it's not something you think about when you think about apartheid and what people went through in order to get their children, education they knew it was advantage. They knew that's why they spent that much time doing it.
Yeah.
But that level of sacrifice, it's a measure of selflessness that, that we don't count, but it's enormous. It's hours out of one's day.
Yeah. So it made me think of this. So there's a quote that I love, Carl Jung. It's people can't see God because they don't look low enough. And what I take out of it, or it's been explained to me, is that it's the small things are not small. They're they're big. So that's like 40 minutes every day times 52 weeks or school weeks, a bit less, but it's a lot. It's the things you do every day that matters. It's those small things because they're consistently doing that. I actually was thinking, I was super busy. We were in startup, and I think I need help with the mundane things, and I'd rather spend the quality time with my kids. So maybe I could get an au pair and take them to do that. And we haven't gone that route anyway. But I've realized that during those drives, that is quality time too, if you make it that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, it was nice that you got to spend that. There's another thing as well. There's a statistic. We'll get to your TED talk because I loved it. The TEDx, the last TEDx that we were at. But there's a TED talk, a guy that does a TED talk was one of the most popular. And he has, the first thing he's popular for doing is having a sheet poster that you can buy where it's got 90 rows of 52 columns. And you mark off where you are in your life, and it shows you visually where you are in a lifespan of a 90-year-old person. You actually get to color in and see exactly where you are, and it's like, wow. The other thing to tie in with your parents is they've done the numbers, the calculations, and there's something, and it's in the 90 percentile, high 90 percentile, I think, that of the amount of time you will spend with your parents is done by the time you're 18.
Yeah.
It's done. Now I see my mom once a week for 2 hours. I used to see her all the time, every day. I'd wake up and see it, and like that's it. So it's a very special time. And knowing those numbers, it can be disconcerting for any parents listening out there, and they think that where their kids are out of the nest or they're 18. But also, if you're present during that time, it can be very, very useful, and you can make the most of that. Like I could probably calculate how many hours I've got left with my mom, and then and she lives 50 minutes away. But at some stage, I won't be able to drive there. I won't be able to drive to see her. It's not accessible. So yeah, I make the most of that time.
Yeah.
So they're driving you in and out, and then after. So any other big things at school?
Yes, I had a really good schooling career. I can't complain about that at all. It was very interesting. Lots of different leadership positions. But you know what's interesting, actually, John? I must tell you, just in sharing this story, I realized something. I had quite an aha moment now based on the quote that you just shared, and that's about service. And I guess it also leads to a lot of the work that I'm doing right now, right? That is about service. But I think that the special thing about being in service to other people without ever making them know about it is probably one of the most special things. And I think it's really beautiful. It's a real gift. And I guess that part of, me as a young child in school, in service, because my whole life I've been in service. If it wasn't in service, the reason that I could so selflessly and still continue to selflessly be in service, I just realized is because my parents have spent their lives in service to me and to my family, and that's very special. And I think what informs that special is or that being in service is a certain selflessness that comes when we offer ourselves to something bigger in the universe. Yeah. So back to school. Sorry.
No, it's brilliant. Love it.
Yeah. Back to school, beautiful experience. Lots of very powerful girls around me because it was an all-girls high school. Even my junior school, a Catholic school run by nuns. So formative experiences of very powerful people showing lots of encouragement, even what was then a very difficult time in South Africa's history. So I think, part of what shapes me and my focus on justice and equity and equality is that I've had very formative experiences of being loved by people of all races and being cared for by people of all races. My mom always tells me the story of when I was young, and my mom was spending, as I said, a lot of time in my dad's business. I am a very tactile person, and so I needed to be held by someone. And so there was our helper at the time. Her name was Eileen, my mom tells me, and I always was carried, baleta on her back. And I still, when my mom reminded me of this experience, I can still smell her, and I still have that experience of being held by her. So I can recall that memory. I don't know, the memory was probably triggered after my mom told me about it. But that experience of incredible love and incredible care of that human towards me. And then, yes, it was mostly white teachers at that school that I was at, those schools, showing love and care, my school group. And so the reason I'm particularly naming races is because that was when I grew up, that wasn't something that was, it wasn't a normal construct of South African society. Had I been sent to an Indian school, I would have been raised by surrounded by lovely Indian children and taught by largely probably Indian teachers, which wouldn't have been a bad thing, but it would have been a different scenario. And I don't know that would have led me to have the same kind of focus or service focus in my life that I do have now.
Yeah, love that. There is something about, so you made me think of this, is from the last Malcolm Gladwell book I read, which is I hate the Ivy League or something like that. And it references like how teachers often students benefit a lot more from teachers of the same race at some stage in their career, in their schooling career. And it was interesting because we look a lot at education. We work with education and AI education specifically. And I'm sure you've seen these avatars that you can do now. And you can pick your teacher now. You'll be able to pick this talking head on any online education at some stage. So you'll be able to match someone that you identify with. There was something that you said that it also made me think. I want to ask about this is because I have obviously a particular view on this. And I was all boys school, and you said you were an all girls school. How do you feel about co-ed schooling and that now?
I don't think it was healthy for me to go to an all girls school, to be honest. And I say that. So was it healthy for me from a life perspective in terms of where I'm at? Sure. I think I can attribute a lot of my success to the fact that I went to an all-girls school because it certainly builds character and it certainly forces you to be a very strong person. Somehow, I think forces is the wrong word. It enables you to be a very strong person. There's something that an all-girls school does. The unleashed power that's possible, I think, is somehow harnessed in that context. That said, I think that we should somehow cultivate unleashed power in a normalized setting. So why does a woman need to have the ability to become unleashed in a world where there are men and women? Women should be able to be unleashed in a world where there are men and women, not women only. So, and I think this is also the message of Women's Month. You know, that women are very powerful. And we need to be able to own our power in all contexts, with men there and without men there. And so it's a very important month. So back to the question around why, you know, your question around, do I think co-ed schools are good? My children are both in co-ed schools. And because I want my daughter to learn how to be unleashed around men. I want her to develop that skill. My worry is that she'll be leashed, but as it's my job as her mom to kind of see if I can enable that same system in a co-ed environment. That's my own challenge.
Okay.
And similarly, John, how do I help my son to support other women to be unleashed?
Yeah. Lean in. Something I don't know actually about Luke. Luke, was it all boys school, co-ed?
Co-ed.
You were co-ed?
Yeah.
I would have guessed that, you know that. I actually would have guessed that. So I went to all boys, like I said, and my kids will go to co-ed for sure. And I even would, my school is DHS, and that's Durban High School. It's not Durban Boys High School. So I would wish that they would look at that, and relook that, because I remember so obviously segregation and that, but I remember when a woman walked onto school grounds, the wolves are out. Like, it was definitely the other. Like, it was like, oh wow, you see that? Like, it creates other, and that's at that level. It's just not. I don't think it's necessary. So I haven't found, and that's why I also ask people, because I want to find the counter. People say hormones and they get out of control, but I'm like, yeah, but have you seen people later on in life? So I loved the language you're using. I keep hearing you say this word, unleashed. It's very interesting. Why? So why? Can you go more about that word?
Yeah. So for me, where I am right now, you know, so I mean, I did a lot of studying and, you know, PhD in diversity and inclusion. And then more recently, I've done a lot of work around coaching. And, you know, I've qualified as a professional integral coach. Why I'm saying that is because my journey has shown me, through both my personal experience and all these qualifications and certifications that I use to grow myself, that the heart of every human is themselves. And, you know, so everything, even in terms of how I approach diversity and inclusion when I teach this in the classroom, and how we drive success in organizations, it starts with the person. And, you know, it's not about necessarily the constraints that other people put on us. It's the constraints that we put on ourselves. And so when I talk about this unleash and leashing, it's, yes, there are social constructs, but there are also individual constructs. And so how do we see ourselves? How do we start to position who we are as humans? What is our value offering? What is our service offering to this world? And I guess the leashing and unleashing are the chains and the shackles of identity and beliefs, social constructs, individual constructs that lock us in to how we see ourselves and how we allow the way the world sees us to influence our everyday.
Amazing. So schooling, was this all in PE?
My formative schooling was all in schooling.
And then I understand you to be an academic and a coach, and shepherd for this V20. That's been amazing. We'll talk about that too. But where did studying start after school, the tertiary education?
So I am an adventurer. I am. And it's taken me a long time to get, in fact, it's a very recent kind of or maybe I realized it when I was younger, but it's something that I've had to recently remind myself of as I start to age and now that I have space as my kids get older, to start to think, oh, who am I beyond a mummy, you know? And I've realized that I've actually always been an adventurer, right, from very young. So even when I was studying, I did a lot of my studies correspondence, and I traveled. I spent a lot of time with my backpack on, exploring many different corners of the world. I love culture. I love watching people. I love exploring people. I find it very fascinating and deeply enriching. So I've studied a lot, both through tertiary educations, but a lot through just observing people. And I continue to do that. So lots of, so where did you study? I guess the best studies were, some of the most important studies in my life were not done at any university. Going to a difficult moment, which is one of the questions that you asked me, I do think that one of the most difficult periods of my life is when I did my PhD. I did not expect how hard that journey would be. It was a kind of fairly casual way in which I fell into I always knew, in fact, my very first day of university, one of the professors asked us, the class that I was in, he said, listen, how many of you are going to do a PhD one day? And I put up my hand and I just thought, goodness, is this me, And, okay, I guess that means, for whatever, you don't even think very deeply of it and about it. And so I ambled on, and then it just ended up, so I guess it kind of fell. And, it so happens that your life kind of, my family we study. That's what we do. We read, we keep studying, we keep learning, we keep growing. Education is just always, it's just considered something part of what we do. It's even now, I did my coaching certification. The automatic question that I ask myself is, okay, what's next? What's my next? And it doesn't have to be a formal certification, but what next to keep growing and extending myself? So coming back to the first question around, the university and where I studied, it's not so much an educational institution. It's a way of life. It's a way of being, to keep growing and to take every opportunity as a way to grow.
Okay, I love that. It's lifelong learning. Okay, and so the travels. I mean, we get stuck into that. Favorite places to travel, worst places, your experiences, and that's come from learning. The topic of learning, because sometimes the most difficult trips are the ones you learn the most from. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think my favorite experiences, let's start there. Let's start with a positive, are all the times that I spent in mountains. I love trekking, and Annapurna mountain range, Kilimanjaro, I've done a lot of trekking. And I think Kilimanjaro was a really difficult climb. That was when we talk about it, what was one of the more difficult moments, certainly summiting Kilimanjaro was hard. But in terms of a hard period, that would have been my PhD. But coming back to best experiences, that's certainly, something that's hard is sometimes the best experience, because you've got to go through something difficult to get to the reward, which is what we remember. So certainly, I think another highlight of my life was Tibet, which was probably one of the more moving periods in my life, to actually be able to see the contrast of that harsh environment, to meet Tibetan people, to meet the beauty of the people. I've also spent a lot of time in Buddhist monasteries and in mountain ranges, in Nepal, in Kathmandu, in Thailand. I love that. I love that spiritual immersion of being in really remote places, exploring, connecting to the silence within.
Okay. Is it the remoteness? You mentioned mountains. What is it about mountains It could be the remoteness. It could be the difficulty to get there. Like you said, it's usually a trek. You use that language.
It's the silence.
And the silence.
The silence, I think, is certainly a key part of that. And of course, I love nature. So, to be in nature is very special. But also when you are in remote places, they're urban. I mean, they're not urban, they're the opposite of that. They are not urban, right? And so you get to really see people, not city life. Because in fact, city life is now very much the same wherever you go, right? You can go to the hustle and bustle of Delhi, or you could go to the hustle and bustle of Paris, and it's still hustle and bustle. It's very much the same. And so people enact and we do what we need to do to survive, including me, right, in my day-to-day life. As we enact in this context, in a professional working environment, we've got to do what we've got to do. You can't sit in mountains unless you're very lucky all day. So during the fortunate times in my life when I have been able to be in those more remote places, you're able to really observe people, as they are, in the spirit of who they are, because they're able to be that. There's spaciousness for them to be able to be that. But in an urban context, we're enacting something different. And similarly, in those spaces, I am able and have the spaciousness to be who I am.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I just wanted to clarify there that you are people that are there or people that have come with. So is that what you observe? Like, because you can come to a place and you can observe the people there, or you can come with people and see how they change when they get to that space. Like you definitely noted your change and it allowed you.
I've gone to many of those places on my own.
Okay.
So I can't say I've noticed the change in other people, so I can't comment on that. But, certainly the people that are in those contexts, I think, there's that book In Praise of Slow.
Okay.
That's what's there, is the lack of hurry that exists in urban contexts. There's spaciousness, which just allows people to be. And it's any person, right? It could also be a traveler. I remember once there was such a contrast experience, and I'm not going to mention the specific nation, but there was a group of tourists that had joined they were all from one country. And we were in the middle of the most serene mountains. And then suddenly I hear this boombox of techno music. And there was a group of youngsters. I mean, I was also a youngster at the time, so it's not that I'm like, there were such bad people, because I myself was a youngster. But I just remember the contrast of that noise against the peace, and it really struck me then around goodness, when people are so socialized to having that constant noise and are then uncomfortable with peace, that they had then chosen to walk through the mountains with a techno boombox.
Yeah. I saw somewhere it said, if you're taking your headphones to the beach, you're doing it wrong. Like you should be listening to the ocean and that sort of stuff. Although, like you said, going back to something you've said, so I do believe there's a yin and yang of everything. So, and too much of anything can be a problem, and
Absolutely.
Even moderation, we need to moderate our moderation. So, but that something that you had said earlier was you are enough. I feel like that sometimes. I get there, and I love that. But I hold in the same space that I could be more, and that's what drives us forward. You said you would. I heard you say that you would. That people would be lucky to spend all their time in the mountains. I don't think you would be able to do it. I think it's a lovely reward that you seem to give yourself, but you're looking for the next thing anyway, and probably the next PhD or the next course or whatever. So the mountains would eventually get like,
absolutely,
yeah, I'd have to come back and do some service here.
Absolutely,
yeah.
There needs to be the yin and the yang, and actually, ideally, it's to find the silence in the busyness. That's we needn't go to the mountains to discover peace. You know, the success of it all is when we can be peaceful wherever we are, even in the most turmoil in our lives, that we can find that. I think what the mountains gave me was the access to that understanding of what that peace was, so that when I returned to the busyness, I knew what I was looking for.
Amazing. So you experienced it and then you could recreate it in some way.
Exactly.
Okay. You do that through meditation or anything? Is that anything practice that you
Well, yes. So now I have to use meditation in order to get there. But I do think that, you know, had I not had the mountains to take me there in the first place, I would have really struggled to get there through meditation, because I wouldn't have known where I was going. You know, I remember many years ago, John, I was sitting in you know, and I've gone through so many different meditation courses, and there was, you know, as a young adult, and the facilitator was saying, you know, what do you see when you meditate? And I remember myself thinking for an answer. You know, what should I be seeing? Because I was wanting to have the right answer. And so my right answer at that time is, I see dolphins. And I thought to myself, like, that's such nonsense. I really don't see dolphins dancing, you know, or dolphins. And I thought, I don't know why I said that. But, you know, I wanted to have the right answer. And so that was my right answer at the time. And now I know that it's because I've experienced what real silence means. And I now also have the maturity to know that it's okay to not necessarily have the right answer. It makes it just that much easier to be able to access the silence when you know what it is.
So I love that. It says some things, Luke and I talk about this often, it's some things you don't know and some things you can't know. So once you know what that silence is, then you can get back there potentially. Sometimes I also meditate, and I have this thing where sometimes I feel like I'm in the garden and I just want to get back. And then the other times where life is chaos, but I know the garden exists and I want to get back there so desperately. And that sort of got me to a place where I was transitioning to your TED talk. And how you and the conversions of diversity and I absolutely loved that and loved your academic work has been on that PhD level of diversity and inclusion. Why? So I can see it that it was inherent in your upbringing. So then, why did you want to democratize that in a way? You've made that public. What drove you to do that?
So I think, you know, and I'm so glad you actually started with a formative story around who am I, because I do think that my childhood had a big role to play in me being an advocate for social justice. That, you know, because I've had formative experiences of love and care from people of all races, it led me to have that being a normalized experience. And so when I then entered the world as an adult and that wasn't the normal experience, it was a bit of a shock. And in fact, not only was it a shock, but when I saw people being treated really badly, I became angered. And then that anger, and I guess once again, going back to a life of service, you can't stand by idly and do nothing when you see an injustice being done. And so that's really led me to do the work that I do. You know, it led me to do my PhD. And it leads me to continue to do the work that I do now. Around all humans deserve to be seen, first by themselves and also by others.
Yeah. So I think you end on self-love. We just talked about that before the show, before we started recording. So you actually end the talk about how important that self-love. And there's the research that I've done on that and I've experienced is it's actually, for whatever reason, it's very difficult for people to love themselves.
Because we grow up feeling that we are not enough. because there's so much messaging from an early age that we are not okay. So, when you are, and there's so much trauma that exists in our society, particularly within South African society. So the bombardment of messaging that you're not enough doesn't support an environment of self-love, unfortunately. It also causes us to be unsettled because we are constantly searching then to prove ourselves, And I think then actually this is where we go back to the other point of what do we then need to regulate? And for some people, it's those extreme things like alcohol and drugs and, all the other very negative things in society. Sometimes it's TV addiction. Sometimes, so many people have said to me, I just need to go home and have a glass of wine. It's the only way that they can regulate at the end of the day. Other people exercise. Some people exercise in the extreme. So, I'm not trying to say one form of, we shouldn't be trying to regulate, but I think the need to regulate becomes even more when we're not coming from a basis of self-love. Because self-love almost is the grounding that holds us stable. And when we don't have that grounding, then we're very wobbly. And then there's those extremes that we then go to in order to find center again. But if the self-love is there, and I don't know, I guess there's a different existential conversation around groundedness. But I think self-love certainly is a conduit to that groundedness that then makes us less, I don't know if the word is pliable, but floppy, as people. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I really believe that, so I was married previously and divorced, and I know that in that relationship, I didn't love myself, actually. So I hadn't learned to love myself, and I don't believe that you can love other people the way, to the extent that you should be able to love them until you love yourself.
Yeah.
It's like an oxygen mask on first thing.
So true.
But it is difficult. It is difficult to do. I think this made me think about this. We talk about different generations and the Gen Zers and the millennials and all this sort of stuff. And I remember when selfies first became a thing. I can remember a selfie stick being a thing at one stage and I can tell you that my generation, I still fall into just the end of the millennials there, but the people that are around my age and older, if they have social media accounts, generally they don't have selfies on them. I had 2 selfies and they were both Movember on my Instagram accounts until I had an experience that sort of changed my mind, and I learned that I need to love myself first before I can be of value to others and I can love other people. So it's quite interesting that what I understand though is that, because people of my generation, I definitely felt this, is I felt that the selfies were they'd gone the other way too much. They were too much love for yourself. It was vanity, and that's why they were taking these selfies. But actually, I understand it's not.
Not at all.
It's an insecurity, yeah.
It's exactly.
And in your TED Talk, you said something about on the individual level, and it's like that depression, anxiety is up 25% globally.
So, Jonathan, this posturing, I actually can't engage much with social media because of the amount of posturing that's there. It hurts me to see the fakeness, and it hurts me that people have to endure that. It's really painful. So it really isn't the same. Self-love is very opposite to taking 1,000 pictures of yourself and posting them on the internet. Self-love is about being really comfortable with who you are, and saying, I'm okay with who I am. I see you. I see the beauty in you. I see the struggles in you. I own them. You are okay despite them. So it's that comfort with self that really takes away insecurity and takes away that the need for other people's validation that I'm okay. Because you believe that you're okay. With the pimples, with the shadows, with the wrinkles, that I'm okay and I'm enough. And your validation is nice, but it isn't what I need to be okay.
I love the language you've used, need, the need versus want. Want. So I want that. I would love your validation, but it's not necessary. It's not needed for my experience to be improved or anything like that. Okay, yeah. So the end of your TED Talk is the idea: when we love ourselves, we are always seen. Beautiful, absolutely beautiful. So. Just to another question that's come from the team here is reflecting on your journey. What one lesson had you wished you had learned earlier in your professional career? Now you've gone into self-love, you wanted to tell yourself. Is there another thing in professional, maybe like, for instance, one of them might be that you didn't realize how difficult that PhD was going to be. But maybe if you'd known, you wouldn't have put your hand up. That's one of the things.
Yeah. So I guess it's okay for things to be difficult. It's really okay. Difficult things are, as Romy says, we experience joy to the extent to which we experience pain. And that's all good and all normal. So we need those ups and downs, And I mean, yes, the PhD was a very difficult experience for me, but I wouldn't choose to not have gone through it. It was very important, and it shaped my life, and it shaped a lot of who I am. Those resilience skills that I developed in that time were essential. And in fact, if anything, a lot of the work that I now teach on self-mastery, I learned those resilience skills firsthand during that PhD, when you really have to kind of just buckle down and say, right, got to go through it. So coming back, Jonathan, though, to the question about the professionally, I don't know why the word kindness has popped into my mind. But I'm going to go with my instinct, and I'm going to say that I think kindness is very important. And I guess kindness links very strongly into this word of empathy, it isn't just, love, you could talk about self-love. Kindness, sure, you can talk about kindness to self. But I think kindness is also about really taking time to understand that other people also are going through something really difficult. And I think that as professional people, we don't spend enough time thinking about what other people are going through and how much support other people need to get through what's going on for them. And so I think the professional self, and maybe younger leaders and managers, one of the key messages, and in fact, not just them, for all leaders, I think kindness is something very important. Once again, kindness is an attribute that we can really only start to unlock once we start to be kind to ourselves. So, you say I end with self-love, but I think actually everything starts with self-love. Because unless we can really start to, unless we have self-love, we can't show, the supportive skills that help us to really harness the different attributes in self that then also end in self-love. And in fact, maybe now as I'm thinking it through, it isn't the start and the end. Maybe the start and the end is the same place, right? And the rest is just the journey.
Wow, love that. Cheapest. Yeah, I think you ended that TED Talk like that, but it was a call to action. It was a reminder, like that's how we started. You started with talking about I think it's 59 conflicts in 90-something countries.
It's more now, Jonathan.
Yeah, I know it's more. The TED Talk was a while ago.
Yeah. It's frightening.
Yeah. I think this is a question again from the team. Is in your work across South Africa and beyond, what cultural, because you mentioned culture as well, what cultural patterns around inclusion and leadership have surprised you the most? So again, we're going maybe positive, maybe negative, I don't know.
Sure.
Either in contrast or in unexpected alignment. I mean, we talked about Ubuntu often, like that's my go-to. I absolutely love that. And the Hawaiians I also have this fascination with different cultures. And I said I was in Hawaii earlier this year. And the Hawaiians have this word, ohana. Yeah, it's my family. Yeah, and it's ohana. And I loved the thing, I might have mentioned this before, but the Hawaiians, they've got this specific word called haole that you hear of, especially when you're going and getting involved in the surf there and the waves. And those are people that are outside of, they're not Hawaiians. There's this, I'll get the definition we'll get it online, maybe put it in the show notes. But it's something that either Thomas Cook or one of the colonizers that came out and they did something that made the Hawaiians of Polynesian descent to believe that these people didn't have souls. So I think haole means person that doesn't have a soul. It's usually a mainlander, someone that's come in. So they do have segmentation or segregation. They do label people, but not optically. It's interesting. It's like, because we've got South Africa, and you spoke about it earlier, and Eckhart Tolle, I would say, would call it our pain body that we have, but that we live with daily and we experience. And it does take us down low and allow us to go to those great heights that we can get to as a nation, I believe. But that was the most sophisticated way, and this is negative because it was absolutely evil, of segmentation is optical. It's like, I can see the difference and therefore you are different to me. I can see it on site. The Hawaiians don't. They actually feel it. Aloha is a feeling. It's a love. And they'll tell you that, I've seen blonde, blue-eyed Hawaiians. There's no Polynesian in them. But they're Hawaiians. And I absolutely love that. So, I mean, the question, I've gone off it a bit far into the question here, but that was what Ubuntu is, the most powerful word at the moment for me. Yeah.
You know, I want to actually go to something that you just said now. I think it's so beautiful. And this is the sense of soulfulness. Every human has the potential to be soulful. I think when they connect to, and I don't mean this in any kind of religious way, but just connect to their silence. Right? So what is the aspect of you that allows you to flourish and bloom? As opposed to what we were talking about before, that posturing. That sense of, what do I need in order to show up here? Those conditions for success that we remain so fixated on having in order to be okay. And I think that what you were just saying now is the permission that we allow ourselves to show up in the fullness of who we are. And then from there into the world. As opposed to, who do I need to become in order to be successful here? The positioning really affects our success, I think, more than we realize. The positioning of who do I need to be in order to be successful here means that there's constantly stress from a human perspective, and there's constantly fakeness. And because there's constant calculating, that person isn't able to just simply step in and show up and be. And my heart goes out to many of those people that haven't been afforded and also allowed them, taken the time. But there is a certain amount of privilege that comes with having had the time to know yourself And it isn't necessarily monetary privilege. As you said, sometimes it's the privilege of remoteness. Maybe there's no financial wealth, but it's a privilege of remoteness that allows you the access. It's the privilege of the lack of trauma that allows you access. So it's not privilege the way we construe it. It's a different kind of privilege that allows us access into really seeing who we are. And then from there, it's a different kind of person that says, okay, I'm able to go there. Not in an egoic way, but just in a way that comes from that place once again of knowing. And so once again, let me just explain this here. It's that formative experience, that I was talking about. Of what are the conditions here that it just allows somebody to experience that from early, that when they're older, they know what they can, what is possible. Versus somebody that's raised in this space of trauma and then therefore has to spend their whole life searching for. And I only had this realization when I was interviewing somebody as part of some research that I'm doing, and they were speaking about the early trauma that they experienced in their lives growing up during apartheid and the incredible trauma of the environment that they were raised in and what that meant for their lives and how they needed to fight and how they really struggled from an identity perspective to know who they were. Because their first experience was that of trauma. So the privilege I'm speaking to is the privilege of spaciousness to not be raised in the space of some kind of conflict or trauma that allows the human to flourish and know who am I, that we can then reconnect to that later on. That then allows that. What was the word? What was the Hawaiian word?
Ahana.
Ahana. No, that was ahana. What was the second word?
Haole.
Haole.
I'm butchering the pronunciation. I do with every other language other than English, but apologies, listeners. Haole.
Haole. That one. And it means soulless, hey? Yeah.
Yeah.
And so that's what this is about, are we enacting from soul or soullessness? And so when you ask the question about culture at work is, when, so in so many workplaces, many people have to adopt a different persona in order to fit in. And I think what surprised me the most going into corporate was not just the norm that we know that Black people need to become somebody different in order to cope with white dominating cultures. That certainly is the reality for many Black individuals. But what surprised me is when I saw white men saying to me, Preeya, I'm struggling to fit into white male norms that don't belong to me. When I've had gay people saying to me, I'm struggling with this heteronormative culture. When I've had single parents saying, I'm struggling with this culture. And so it's all of these stereotypes that really help me to understand that this diversity and inclusion work really needs to move away from group culture. That yes, certainly we can talk about these trends on a research level, but if we really want to make impact, we need to start connecting in a human way. Because, and I say this often, in a room full of 35-year-old Zulu-speaking men, there's rich diversity. So we need to really move beyond those physical aspects of self to explore who are we. And to answer your question, John, that was the most surprising thing for me going into companies, is people are actually longing to be able to show up as themselves. There's two things that separate them from that. The one is their own permission and their braveness to go there. So they need permission from themselves to show up as themselves. For some people, it's very complex because it starts with understanding who they themselves are before they can show up as that self. Then second is the braveness to show up as that. And then the second is actually the organization's permission. So many people put it immediately on the organization. And I hear them. I think there's a lot of organizations that certainly don't create the culture that enable all humans to be able to show up as themselves. But there's even more humans that don't see themselves.
Okay, that's a beautiful place to transition to the ad you've selected. So we'll watch that now.
Okay.
Allow me.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I love this piece. I hadn't seen it before. And there's lots to talk about in this particular piece. I got straight out of it was, you talked about it now. It's you actually have agency to do things, and I for some reason I wrote this, and you've triggered it a few times already. That Lean In by Sheryl Sandberg. I feel like it should be a set book for. I remember giving it to interns at one stage, but because for males to lean in, you said how do you let your son? How do you enable him to lean in and for the woman in the room? Why did you choose this ad?
For so many reasons. The first is that is just, it's so normal that we see some things and we don't see other things. The first is injustice troubles me on a soul level, and I really don't like that we treat some people differently based on their race. And that is a global concern, and not just on race, based on the color of their skin, based on their gender, based on their sexual preference, based on their gender orientation, whatever it is, based on their able or disable, neurodiversity, whatever it is. There are so many things that divide us and that people use to divide themselves from others. So that it really troubles me because it goes back to that sense of ahauli, that we cannot really allow people to show up in the fullness of themselves. Because we have these beliefs that separate us, that this is wrong and this is right. And, and I've seen the thin line between how people govern things as being right and wrong, and it can be just erased with a rubber. It's as simple as that. And then redefined. And sometimes I really wonder why people don't use that eraser more liberally. To just say this is a really harmful belief that is really divisive and it's affecting somebody's ability to just show up as a human and be seen as a human. I can't understand it.
It's lovely. Someone talked about it. It might have even been on a podcast recently that I saw it, but they have an ant on a flat piece of paper. Have you seen this thing I'm talking about? And they draw a circle around the ant in a permanent marker and something like that. And then the ant does not cross the it can't cross the border at once. Because, and it's something you talked about, I'm seeing it as a way you talk about. As soon as you make it so that the ant does cross, I can't remember how they do it exactly, it will never be constricted by that line again. So it doesn't matter how many circles you draw and all that sort of stuff. It's not, it's not, once you've broken through, it's like the neural pathway or the experience you talked about. Once you've been there, especially importantly as when you're a child, but once you've been there, you can go back there and access it, and it is a privilege. I totally get it. I love this. This ad. It's some things you can't see, but like that points it out so explicitly. And then I got this silence makes you complicit in the action, actually. And that's what, because some people don't like conflict. I don't necessarily like conflict. I'm not, but I know what it like. I know how I feel when I haven't done something that I should. Like I haven't said something that I should have. How badly I feel and how negative it can get. When you take so you never get away with anything, even silence.
So I think for me, the silence is definitely one part of that. There's another part of this, and this is that unconscious awareness. So many people, many people don't realize the extent of their own bias, right? In that example, I mean, I think it was probably an example of somebody being more aware, but maybe because it was acted. But there is a lot of times that people are unaware of the way that they enact bias. And then that, of course, shows up, as prejudice and discrimination. But it's still very unaware. So that's the one thing that troubles me about that. But the second is that we can let one person be aware or be unaware, but then when two people do it, is it really unaware? Right? So when two people do it, then we're just actually socializing that it's okay. Because we can usually see when somebody else is doing something wrong. But it's exactly what we say then. We are choosing to be quiet about it, which then validates it and says that this is okay. So that's where I've got a problem with that. And it happens all the time in the boardroom, is maybe somebody's aware, but because other people don't say something about it, it then becomes normalized.
I got this, it's a Martin Luther King. Well, it seems to be attributed. I'm always worried about who actually said things on the internet. But in the end, we'll remember not the words of our enemies, but the silence of our friends.
Yes.
And again, back to the word ahana and family and that sort of stuff. At one stage, I really struggled with family. Lots of people, I have family groups on WhatsApp. I have a family group, but not everyone is an Oliff in that group. So it's not surname, but that's called the Oliffs. The group is called the Oliffs. So it's an interesting one. And I remember someone asked, can you send a picture of your family? I think it was during COVID, during corporate. I just sent the picture of the earth.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I loved it. But it's because it is. It's like I mentioned in that EO, we'd have these three things. It's personal, business, and family that you speak about. And the extension of family, there's a fourth one. It's community.
Yes.
But community is, as I understand, is just an extension of family. In a way, it just goes broad.
It's an extension if we allow ourselves to go there.
Perfect.
So, if we don't see the unlimitedness of ourselves, we are able to go everywhere. If we are limited in how we see ourselves, then we are limited also in terms of our relationships, right? So it's all in that positioning, and it all goes back to that soulfulness. It's the same conversation.
Yeah, it's so interesting because, and what we were talking about earlier in the culture, I got this from this ad. It reminded me of this. So it's a cultural, like you said, you're interested in these cultural phenomena. I find it Very, very interesting to watch and understand different cultures, and they do the things that people do and the way they do it. So, and back to the ad, it made me think, like, sometimes in the lean-in perspective, sometimes the man's only action to do is to open the door and to hold the door. That's what we're there for, to guard the door sometimes, because it does need guarding. And that's it. And it's now the woman's a female. You need that. So you need to know what you should be doing at every time, every moment, to be aware of it and be okay and comfortable with yourself that sometimes you're just the doorman. You need to open the door. And then, so I love that. But I know this about Zulu. I think it's Zulu culture, but it might I might be wrong. But it was explained to me. So that it was interesting. It came up, and I loved it. So it was men don't open the door in that culture for the woman, and Western culture would have you think that's chivalrous and that's what you do. Men open the door and go in themselves first. Do you know why they do that?
Yes, to check that the room is safe.
Yes, I didn't know that. I think that's incredible. Like, that's it. So you can still you can still guard the door, open the door, you can still open the door and move inside and hold the door, but you're going in to check that it's safe first. What do many Westerners have opened the door and there's been a snake in the room or something like that. So it might have been something else, but it was such an interesting take on something that we see a certain way because we see the world as we are and as well as and we are because of the way we've been raised and all that sort of thing, and all those experiences. Yeah, but it was a beautiful, beautiful ad. Your quotes, I'm going to transition to now. I absolutely loved it, but I want to know what it means to you. And it's everything is in its perfect place.
So what this means is that even in the midst of chaos, everything is okay. We're meant to be there to learn whatever lesson we need to learn. And, sometimes we're like, I just need to get through this. And when we keep saying, I just need to get through this in order to be somewhere else, then we diminish the lesson that is present in that moment. So we need to learn to be okay when things are great and also when things are less great. And know that there's a lesson in there for us.
I love it. So I mentioned it before, but I've never spoken to you about it. So my early trips when I was studying as well, I was fortunate to be able to travel, and Hawaii was one of the places I went to. And I've come to realize that this experience, it's all fun. That's what that quote means to me. It's all fun. Some of it is difficult fun. Some of it is interesting fun. Some of it is it's a different type of fun. Like paddling out and getting blasted to the beach by big waves and almost drowning. It's not the same fun as catching the wave, but the catching the wave's 10 seconds. And then the paddling's most part.
Exactly.
Like the climb up the mountain is probably longer than the time in the mountain.
Absolutely.
Or the time between. And but that's definitely still fun. You can still, it's part of the experience, it has to be. And I would say but it can't be not fun. You're in Hawaii, on the other side of the earth.
Yeah.
From South Africa. It's 12 hours difference, actually. It's amazing. So I love that.
John, that's so true. I just actually want to reflect on something as you said that, because as you were talking about the surfing, I was thinking about, when I was summiting Kilimanjaro, and when you summit Kilimanjaro, you used to begin the final summit at midnight. Well, depending on how fit you are, right? Because when you need to get to the upper part of the mountain before it starts to melt. So very early morning, very, very early morning. And so because I wasn't one of the most fit people that were climbing, I was more kind of slow and steady instead of I'm super fit, let me get to the top quickly. I had to, I think, begin my summit at around midnight. And, the thing that I remember most about that summiting process is not actually the 2 minutes when I was at the summit standing there, having my picture taken, taking my own picture. because it was just me and my Sherpa. The thing that I really remember was taking, a step forward and then you slide, and then you're taking a step forward and you slide, because the earth is so soft. And, so just coming back to everything in its perfect place is that without the moments of slide, we actually can't have the goal, Without paddling out, we can't catch the wave. So it's all part of the journey, and we need to celebrate that and own that more, and not be distressed and dismayed when we're paddling out or when we're sliding down, because that is our inclination. I'm not okay, but actually you're in a great place. You're paddling out, It's a framing.
Amazing. We haven't asked this question yet. Who are your incredible machines?
So it's a complex answer. In response to that, my first answer was, in fact, is my grandfather, my late grandfather, who was just the most incredibly amazing human, deeply spiritual, deeply intelligent, a leader amongst others. But I think what I've really admired the most is his incredible peace. So not just spiritual, but really when you see how somebody takes that spirituality and masters it. So, I could, for example, give you spiritual leaders. That would be easy and more accessible. And of course I admire them. But the reason I admire my grandfather is because, he was an ordinary human being that was able to accomplish that. And I think that that's incredible. Not that, spiritual leaders and so many great people didn't once start out ordinary, but I had a relationship with my grandfather. He was my grandfather. The reason that answer I said to you is complex is because there's so many other humans in my life that I look and see and I learn from every single day. So, my grandfather is not here anymore, but every day I learn from the people that I encounter and I meet. Many days it's my husband. Many days it's my children. Many days it's my dog. Sometimes it's the butterfly or the bird. But there are so many people and creatures and flowers that are willing to offer us lessons every moment of every day when we are open to receiving it, So I think it isn't so much about, who is the icon that you can learn from. I think actually every person is an icon. For me, it goes back to, am I in the space to receive what they are willing to offer?
That openness. Anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you? And is there anything you want to close with?
It's all about love. That's it.
Thank you so much. The incredible Preeya Daya.